Hi, today I'm going to talk about and show you how to make a checkerboard end-grain cutting board. I'm going to do this out of maple and cherry. Right now I'm planing down the cherry pieces I glued up. I had some small scrap pieces together. We're going to make this cutting board out of today. So get those all surfaces to the right thickness so we can get on the table saw and cut those down for the first glue up. Now we're going to cut down the cherry to about 1.5 inches. It varies depending on how thick the boards are, but that's where I usually try to keep it at. So we'll cut those down into strips so we do the first glue up. Now we have all those cut up. I have the maple already done. Now we can put those together in the first pattern. I always like to have all the wood set up in the way the pattern is going to be glued up, and then from there I turn it over on the side so I have exposed the side that I need to apply the glue to. And I'm using Type on 3. It's a food grade glue. Works really well, has about a 10-minute or so open time, so you do have to kind of put this together fairly quick, and I'll show you why that's important here in a second. Even when you plan things out the best way, sometimes you do have an uh-oh moment. And here's my uh-oh moment. I have one of my boards in the wrong orientation. This is the bad thing when you're using thinner stock material, gluing it together. You can definitely see part of the pattern when you glue those two pieces together if you don't put them in the right orientation. So to be consistent. So I had to undo this one. You can see how well that glue starts sitting up so quick, and apply it on a different side so I could quickly get this still glued up in time. Now time to take them out of the clamps. I usually try to glue them up for anywhere from 3 to 4 hours, depending on if I have enough time to be in the shop. If not, a lot of times it's overnight as well. So get all my clamps off, get off my cauls, and then I'll start scraping off all the glue. Now with all the glue off, now I'm back to the planer just to kind of even things up a little nicer, get all remaining glue off so I have a nice clean surface to actually start my next cut. Now that I set the table saw off, this is going to be the thickness of the board, what you're setting up here. So whatever thickness you're going for, this is where this will come from with the pattern. For this case, I think I did about 1.25 inches or so for the thickness. And then we'll cut these down to as a lot of times many strips as you can. I think my overall length of my blank I have glued up is about 18 inches or so. So depending on your thickness, that'll depend on how many pieces you get out, how big your board's going to be. Alright, now this is the fun part where we get to see what the pattern looks like. So what you're going to do here is turn everything over, and then every other strip you cut you want to rotate 180 degrees. This will show you the pattern. That's why it's important when you actually do your first glue up that you make sure you have the opposite type of wood you're working with on each end. That way the pattern will show up. If you don't, it doesn't matter how many times you flip it over, it's always going to look the same. Again, using more of the Type Bond 3 food grade glue. Now when you're putting it back together, you want to make sure you're aligning each of the patterns up nice and square. It's important to get this right now because the glue will start to cure, but before you put the clamps on. Alright, now I've let this sit for probably overnight, about maybe 10-12 hours or so. Now we're taking off all my clamps. You're never going to have too many clamps on here. I like to try to keep it nice and square. Again, I'm going to come back with my very dull chisel and kind of try to scrape off at least the high parts of all the dried up glue. Alright, now we're back to the planer again. I know there is a lot of different woodworkers out there saying you shouldn't plane end grain wood for chip out, and it's absolutely true. It will happen. I try to do light passes, but what I didn't show here on camera was I did take a 1/8 inch round over bit on my palm rounder and took off the top edges, just so those leading edges that would actually go through the planer. I find doing that on both sides will reduce the chip out threat for sure. But this is a lot easier to do than trying to sand it all down and try to make sure it's nice and smooth. Now that we have it, I feel as planed as we can go back to the table saw, and using my sled, I'm going to square everything up on all four sides. And now it's time for everybody's favorite part of woodworking, the sanding. Using 3M Cubitron sandpaper here. I always start out with 80 grit. Seems to be the longest part of the sanding process for me usually. This will get out any of the marks from my planer, but this will really set it up for a good finish here if you take your time and do it right. Then I go to 150 and go over everything again. And before I do my final sand, I go all the way around the whole perimeter with an 1/8 inch round over. This softens up the edges real nice, makes it look nice and finished. It will also protect the board too from use, so it doesn't actually chip out when moving it around, using it in your kitchen. And now I'll do a final sand at 220. If you guys are enjoying what you're seeing, I would really appreciate a subscribe, like, leave me some comments, that'd be great. Finally, we're doing some branding here. I have my own Eagle Eye Builds brand I had made. I have it placed in an old drill press, so I just heat it up with a torch and give it a couple presses down to actually burn it into the bottom. Alright, moment of truth. I use food grade white mineral oil for my finish. I pour it on. I find just putting it on with by hand is the best way to make sure it soaks all the way through. You want to really give it a good soaking to protect the wood and also protect it from any type of bacteria that might happen if any type of food you're using on it. As you'll see when I flip it over, you can see it kind of where it's come through on some of the pores of the wood, and we get both sides really well lathered up and soaked good. Now, one of the final steps as far as finishing goes, I like to use some board butter on here. I actually make my own Eagle Eye Builds board butter. The QR code was on screen there if you want to go to my website and buy some for yourself. But I put this on with a microfiber cloth. I find that seems to work out the best, kind of get it in all the pores, really get it in there good. This is really what's going to protect it day-to-day use so the wood itself doesn't dry out. If you don't probably maintain your board on a regular basis, the wood itself will dry out, potentially will crack, maybe some of the joints will crack as well. So I find doing a good coat on this, I do this on all my boards after I finish them, and then I recommend if you do have any board like this, you should wash it with some warm water, no soap, let it dry well, and then come back with some more board butter. I think you should be conditioning this as much as you're using it. Maybe not every time you are cleaning it off, washing it, but I would say you just need to keep an eye on it. You can tell when the wood's getting too dry after a while. And the final step is put little bumpers on here on the bottom side, so keep it up off the countertop that you're using it on. Also helps it so it doesn't slide around too. And this finished product. Appreciate everybody watching. Take care.